Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Music Space, where we help working musicians just like you learn how to quickly and easily make a living with your craft. So, if it's your first time here, consider subscribing to the channel. So, this is video 2 in the series that we're doing on branding. Now, in video 1, we talked about why branding is important. We defined what it is. We talked about how to use it. We talked about thinking about what you do, your brand, your artistry, your musicianship, your craft as a business, as a product, as opposed to just being a regular musician. And we talked about how that is one of the main ways that you set yourself apart from other musicians and other artists who do the same types of things that you do. And we talked about why these things are important. So if you're just tuning in, make sure you go check out that video. That way you'll understand what's happening in this video. And I'll leave a link to it in the description of this video. Now, in this session, we're going to talk about how to find your branding angle and how to discover your USP. So I'm going to teach you how to find what's known as USP, which stands for Unique Selling Proposition. Again, USP, Unique Selling Proposition. Now, this is really important, and if you get this down, you will be effective at individualizing yourself from what other brands and other bands and other artists and other musicians do versus what you do. And seriously, if you don't grasp this concept, you'll be viewed as just another regular musician, another keyboard player, another singer, another drummer, whatever the case may be, and you'll be thrown into this pack of other musicians that everybody just, picks and chooses from. And they have no reason to pick you over the other people. So what is USP? What is Unique Selling Proposition? Basically, what this is the small but important details, the important distinctions that separate you from another artist, another band, another entity, another business. So for instance, you are a keyboard player. What is it about you? What are in the details about you and what you do that make you different from any other keyboard player who plays just as well? Basically, the general rule here is that you want to be able to separate yourself, your skills, your band's image, all of this kind of stuff, separate that, individualize it from what other people do and what other bands do. Now, this can be done in multiple ways, and some of the ways are more impactful than others, just depending on your unique position. One of the biggest mistakes that I see from independent musicians, and again, I'll define independent musicians just as musicians who haven't been signed to a major label of any sort. But one of the things that I see as a mistake that independent musicians do when they're trying to individualize and characterize themselves is that they immediately go out and start doing things like building websites, getting logos done, getting t-shirts made, and all of this kind of stuff. And all of this stuff is cool and it works in a particular context. But these aren't the core things that are going to necessarily separate musicians from other musicians and artists from other artists. The most important element that you want to focus on when you're trying to individualize yourself is something that I call FIM, F-I-M. And this is really key. You should really write this down. The goal is to be first in mind of your customers or your consumers. Again, the goal really is to be the first in mind. You need to be the first thing that comes to mind when your artist, or when your consumer rather, is thinking about hiring a musician, hiring an artist based off what you do. When a consumer, or when a person who needs an artist or a band or a keyboard player or drummer, whatever you play, saxophone, whatever the case may be, you need to be the first thing that they think of when they have those needs. So the scenario should go like this. A bunch of people are sitting around thinking about putting this event together, this huge event, a family reunion, a wedding, whatever the case may be. And that event is going to require some musical skills or some musical entertainment that you're able to provide. So when they get to talking about, oh, what band should we hire? What artist should we get? one of the first names that should come to their mind is yours, or your band's, or your brand's. I'll use my Starbucks example as I usually do. Imagine a bunch of ladies or fellas, whoever, just ladies for this example, who haven't seen each other in a long time, and they're all going to be in this same city, and they want to organize a meetup. And one of the ideas is to meet up over coffee. Now, before I go on, the moment that I said coffee and meetup, what's the first place that you thought of? It was probably Starbucks, right? Well, Starbucks if you live here in the United States, because that's probably the most popular coffee shop. But whatever the most popular coffee shop is where you are, that's probably where you thought of first. But anyway, these ladies are organizing a meetup, and they want to meet over coffee. So the idea comes up, okay, what coffee shop do you want to meet at? What do you think they're going to think of first? What's the first brand name, or the first in the list of names that's going to come up? It's probably going to be Starbucks at the top of that list. This is what I mean by being first in mind to your consumers. Okay, so what are some of the ways that you can discover your USP, or your unique selling proposition, and become first in mind to your consumers? So one way is to use your personality traits. Now, what I mean by this is the one thing that separates us all and that gives us our distinct characteristics just as human beings, before we add musicians and all of that kind of stuff to our character, is just our personality traits. A mother, for example, is able to tell her twin daughters apart simply based on the differences between those two daughters' personalities. Think of artists who are in the same or a similar genre as each other, and how they separate themselves just based off personality. If you're into soul, think about what separates, Patti LaBelle from Aretha Franklin, for example. If you're into funk, what separates the Ohio Players from the Commodores? If you're into rock, what separates Metallica from Guns N' Roses? A lot of these separations are based off the distinctive personality characteristics of the artists themselves, and sometimes of the personalities that's created as a sort of, synergized group as a band. Really, just think of a person who has never heard of any of these artists I just named in these comparisons. Say they heard Patti LaBelle and Aretha Franklin for the first time. What are the things about their voices or about their looks, if they just saw their bodies and not their faces, or saw some hand movements or something like that? What are the things that separate these two artists from each other? Now, one of the things that you can do in addition to using your personality traits to, discover your USP, is to also use your musical traits. So what musical skills are you particularly good at that, come natural to you? What are the things that are within the context of what you already do? Again, if you're a singer, what kind of singer are you? What is your strength as a singer? These things are your musical traits. Do you play scales really well and really fast? If you're a drummer, are you a technical drummer where you use a lot of rudiments? Are you more of a stylistic drummer, or are you more of a flashy drummer, the stick twirling, neon lights and all of the toms kind of drummer? All of these things are your musical traits, and your unique selling position can be built around these things. Now, in addition to these two, another thing you can do to discover your USP is simply create an avatar. So one thing you can always do is create a persona around your particular skills. And what I mean by this is you can make yourself or your band or your artistry appear completely different than what you actually are. You can create a persona or a character or an avatar outside of that to present that becomes your unique selling proposition. But the trick to this is something you have to do really carefully and really skillfully. So you remember some years ago when Beyonce created this avatar of Sasha Fierce? Now, for her, it didn't really last that long, simply because I think her as Beyonce was already such a powerful, unique selling proposition and such a powerful brand. Her trying to create something outside of that was just kind of almost irrelevant. Like, why would you try to create something better if it's not going to be as good as Beyonce? You know what I mean? So that's what I mean by you have to be careful and you have to do this skillfully. Now, the thing about this is it's really easy to do, and it can be done in 1,000 different ways, if not more. You could do it with, clothing and outfits. Like, you can become the band or artist who wears bright red clothing to all of their shows and all of their gigs. And this is something that you can become known for. Like, literally, you can be first in mind. People can think of the band that wears bright red. Like, that's literally a unique selling proposition. Another way you can do this is center it around genre. You can create an avatar around that. Do you primarily play like 90s and 80s music and stuff like that? One of the things you can do is implement like 90s dance steps in all of your shows, and you can become the band known for doing the 90s dance steps in their shows. Now, just a few precautions with all of these things before you jump in head first. Try not to think of these things in the context of one thing is necessarily better than the other. Think of them in terms of what actually works best for you and your band or your artistry versus which one is like objectively best. Preferably, you should choose something that's like really easily adaptable and doesn't take a lot of resources and money and all of this kind of stuff to make happen. This way you make it easier to implement and you're more likely to do it. Also, one thing you should avoid is being too gimmicky when you're picking these things. People have their BS detectors on all the time, and they can easily sniff out when you're just being super gimmicky in order to cover up things like lack of talent. And though this may not even be the case, you may be super talented, but when you're being super gimmicky at the same time, people tend to perceive you as you don't have talent and you're just trying to cover up something. Now, the good part is generally this is not a huge concern because people are generally forgiving. But when things get really over the top, the microscope kind of hones in on you. So you want to be careful about that. And keep in mind, these things are actually and truly marketable. They can become elements of femme for your consumers. These things can become elements that are first in mind elements to your consumers and make them think of you when they're trying to hire bands and trying to hire artists and stuff that are like you. So here's what you should do right now in order to make sure you get your USP down. Pull out some paper or your notepad on your mobile device and write down a total of 10 ideas about your unique selling proposition. And seriously, this is extremely important. So spend some time doing this. Spend an hour or two trying to come up with this list. Use things like your musical traits, your personality traits, or create an avatar and come up with 10 unique things that you can start implementing as your USP today. Now, after you get this list of 10, try to spend some time narrowing them down to about 2 or 3 of the best things that you have on the list that you think will work best for you. Then what you want to do is get some feedback about those 2 or 3 things. You can use your close personal friends and ask them what they think about these things. You can use your social media to, even your own personal social media where you just have friends and family and things like that, and ask them what they think about these particular things or you adopting these particular things. A lot of times, the feedback that you get from things like this can be very valuable. Now, again, be careful not to take these things personally. Some people are, cynical and they'll talk about it and say it's stupid and all of this kind of stuff. You may get some of that. Just be aware of that. Use the feedback, chew the meat, spit out the bones kind of thing. Use the feedback and kind of, see what people are leaning toward and see if those kind of things will work best for you and your artistry or your band. Okay, so in the next session, we're going to start talking about marketing. We're going to talk about how to take all of these things that we've talked about thus far and packaging them together in a nice package with a nice bow on it, where we can present ourselves when we're looking to get hired, when we're building our websites, or things like that, where we're putting out our business cards and media and stuff like that, so that these things sort of become a whole package for us as artists. And again, this is something that is really, really important. So make sure you stay tuned into the training. All right, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded, and hit the like button as well. Also, if you find that you're getting value out of these videos and out of the videos on the channel, go down below this video and click on that tip link and leave me a tip. That way it helps support the channel. It helps bring new content and things to the channel. And it just shows your appreciation for the value that you're getting out of the videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next session.